Hello, Birdley. And yes, surprise. It's it's me. She said rather unnecessarily. So do feel free to turn your computer off or turn your monitor off, and then take all necessary steps to block the bearded idiot whom you now see before you. Preliminary matters. Yes, first of all, wonderful. Thank you very, very, very much. And I like your handwriting, and I really like the quotes, and I like the card too. Sorry for the light. You know what it looks like anyway. Interesting. This makes me even more semi-desperate to contact you about various tangential matters. But I shall be patient. I really hope you're doing okay. And I'll try to compensate for the unmitigated horror of the sight of John Paddington at 10 to 7 in the morning, complete with croaky voice, dopey eyes, and a beard that really has got to go. God, it's multicoloured. I've got white there. No, what's that? Some sort of albinoism, which goes with my tuft there. I've always had that. And combination of caffeine and nicotine in the moustache. It's really a wonder that anybody ever talks to me. Maybe they won't after they've seen this. And it gives me an opportunity to introduce you to I like not penguins, are they? Stupid me. Puffins, of course they are. This is a friend of mine. He says hello. And there was somebody else I wanted to introduce you to. Can't remember where he is. No. Right, I better get on with things because this is going to turn into a massive file, which will take approximately 3 years to upload if I don't crack on with Cocker. And where were we? Yeah, you'd think I'd have this ready, wouldn't you? You'd be overestimating me. Jesus, John, come on. The river, yeah, or Yar, or I don't know. I still haven't looked it up. Haddiscoe, that's right. And the strange geographical dislocation that such an environment creates in the mind. That's the problem with reading it in advance to prepare, and I do, honestly, is that the preparation lingers in the mind, making me think that I have read things aloud that I haven't. Ah, yes, he was dealing with distances, the distance to Haddiscoe. And the way that walking in that environment makes achieving an objective so much more elusive but satisfying. And starting again on page 21. The net result was a reaffirmation of the Broadlander's old conclusion. This was a landscape fit only for boats. In the Broads, sailing vessels are still ubiquitous, and their serene passage while I was on one of my cross-country meanderings only intensified my feelings of annoyance. In truth, though, I had little grounds for complaint. The merest glance at the map shows you that the Yare Valley is depicted as a network of blue rhomboids. The two-dimensional image of the interlacing dikes reminds me of shattered glass, or, possibly, and this may be a simple case of projection, an abstract representation of the mental state induced by walking around the fields themselves. And, yes, I have read that bit. Have I read the next paragraph? I'm sorry. Right, I'm going to start again on page 22. Apologies for general uselessness. It's really no one's fault but my own. I'm desperately trying to think of somebody else to blame, but I can't. And serendipitously, the paragraph where I'm going to restart is about walking through an area and then only slowly realizing that he has walked there before but not recognized it. Another factor was the difficulty of access. Different spots remained far longer as a sequence of disconnected fragments I'd stumble on. Damn, full stop there. Disconnected fragments. I'd stumble on a plantation or a piece of marsh and feel excited to have located some totally new feature. Only slowly would it dawn on me that the neighbouring building, or the configuration of trees, the church tower looming over the top, were all vaguely familiar. The penny would drop. I'd been here before. The difference had been the direction of approach. Almost perversely, the Yare's recalcitrance became part of its appeal, and I found myself working at the business of mental connection. The slow mastery of its geography seemed to increase the sense of belonging. As if to reinforce its tightening grip on my spatial imagination, soon after moving to the Yare, I supplemented my chart of the earth, which had been on my office wall for 15 years, with a map of the valley. It had become my alternative world. The most inaccessible part is the triangular block formed by Halvergate and Haddiscoe Island. While the former is the more famous and customary name, it was the site of an environmental struggle in the late 1980s that exposed the corrosive, tsunami-like destructive power of excessive grain subsidies flowing from the Common Agricultural Policy. Oh, that's a European Union mechanism for basically paying farmers to do very little except damage the environment. Like most things from the European Union, it's inept. From here I'll refer to it as Haddiscoe, simply because it's the part of the whole that I know best. All of the country is low and rolling. Its highest point is only 100 meters. But this fan-shaped extension best fulfills Noel Coward's famous dictum on the Norfolk landscape. I don't know whether you've heard that. He just dismisses Norfolk with 3 words. Flat. Very flat. That was my interruption, I'm sorry. Back to Cogger's words. It is indubitably, resolutely flat, with much of it below sea level. Technically, Haddiscoe is also an island, isolated from the neighbouring land by the converging Yare and Waveney rivers, and a man-made water channel linking the 2 rivers. It says something about the long human timeline inherent in this landscape that the Dead Strait Navigational Canal was dug in 1835, and yet today is still known as the New Cut. Together with the 2 rivers, the New Cut completes a 3-sided moat around Haddiscoe. Within this level expanse, there is just a single straight road going nowhere, and it is unpeopled apart from 3 homesteads. 2 of them crouch down in the lee of a steep bank that prevents the Waveney reoccupying its old domain. Their roofs are barely higher than the level of the river, and all of them have a lager-like periphery of outbuildings, as if defending themselves against the vast nothingness of Haddiscoe's sky. Just to the south of the island from the bridge at St. Olave's, about 7 meters high, you can look upstream to the west, and the view is uninterrupted for 12 kilometers. To the north, across Haddiscoe's entire length, you can see the giant wind turbines at West Somerton, slicing the air with great clarity, yet they are 20 kilometers away. Such a place requires a major aesthetic recalibration from its admirers. A transition many don't care to make, and they dismiss it as featureless and boring. It is a result of our utter disregard for the beauty of the open plain that the landscape has been disfigured by a regiment of monstrous electricity pylons. It is inconceivable that the lakes or the Cotswolds would have been violated in this way. Yet Haddiscoe seems not even to have been considered a landscape, more a void to the west of the old ports of Lowestoft and Great Yarmouth, to be treated any old how. It is true that there are none of the usual constituents of the picturesque. At its most stark, there are very few buildings, no trees, and no contours. The stripping away of customary markers does strange things to one's perception. Perspective is flattened out. Features that lie at some range from one another in a horizontal plane are compressed together. Details in the middle distance, a passing boat, a herd of cattle, the brick cylinder of a derelict mill, swim in an indeterminate way, neither getting any closer nor further away, regardless of how long one walks towards them. And if you keep your eyes fixed on this mid-horizon, near things can then take you totally by surprise. Mounds of slub, the thick black mud, lugged from a dike by mechanical digger, break the horizon like a range of hills. Lines of dead thistles erupt from the ground like the broken tops of dead pines in a landscape of snow. A hare jinking away from your feet, bounding off with that odd, intermittent sideways thrust of the hind legs can seem as big as a deer. Yet the sheer emptiness of the place can intensify feelings of intimacy with those things that are close. In autumn, as I walk the long road bisecting Haddiscoe, the air is filled with dragonflies, and occasionally a hunting individual will fly almost at my face. The chitin, snapping together as it manoeuvres, is like the crackle of electricity, or a firework fizzing before its explosion. Then it settles on the concrete wall, its weightlessness poised on the needle tip of its 6 hair-thin legs. In a few days, weeks at most, you know its life will end. Yet here it is, a scarlet cruciform, filling itself with autumn light, savouring the immensity of its existence. The space all around seems a part of such close encounters. It particularizes the moment. Things seem special. I could be wrong. The background conditions may be far more prosaic. It may be that I am simply trapped by the sheer impediment of the river, and that I am just making the most of the wildlife that's to hand. But I don't think so. In the Aire Valley, so many of the things that I had once overlooked or taken for granted were charged with fresh power and importance. It gave rise to a strange and fruitful paradox. I had come home to a place where everything seemed completely new. And that's the end of chapter 3, which is one of the best things that I've read this year. Really astonishing. I hope you enjoyed it too, and I keep saying we'll be in touch. We probably won't. Take care of yourself. Bye bye.